Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to make this airline dress with pockets and back ties. Now this dress can be worn as a loose fit dress, or you can tighten the ropes at the back for a more fitted look. If you find this video helpful, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you have any questions, you can leave us in the comment section below. And with that being said, let's get into the video. First off, we're going to start by drafting the pattern, and we're going to start by drafting the back pattern. Now on the paper, I'm going to trace out the neck and the armhole for my basic bodies, and I'm also going to mark out the armhole and the waistlines. Then I drew in those lines. From the waistline, I measure 8 inches downward. This will be my hip line. From the hip line, I measure and mark the full length of the dress, which for me is 43 inches. On the armhole line, I mark a quarter of my bust measurement, which for me is 8 inches, plus 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. On the waistline, I measure and mark a quarter of my waist measurement plus 1 inch for ease, which for me is 7¼ inches, then my seam allowance. Now on the hip line, I mark a quarter of my hip measurement plus 2 inches for ease, which for me is 10¼ inches, and of course my seam allowance. And then on the hemline, I'm going to add 5 inches to the measurement that I put on the hip line, which is going to be 15¼ inches. Now using a ruler, I'm going to join these points together. Then I'm going in with a curve to blend out the sharp points. For the hem, I go up by 3/4 inch at the side seam and draw a slight curve into the hemline. Now for my neckline, I have the width to be 3 inches and the depth as 1 inch. On the shoulder line, I go in by 1¼ inch and redraw the armhole. Then I add seam allowance of 1/2 inch to the shoulder, armhole and neckline. And for the hem, I added an allowance of 6/8 inch. On the side seam, I measure 2 inches from the armhole and 5 inches from the shoulder line, and then I draw a curve like so. And this right here is going to be what I'll use for the facing for the back. Now the back pattern is done, and we're going to go over to the front pattern. Now on my paper, I've drawn my baseline up here, and I drew my center line 2 inches from the edge of the paper. Now just like the back, it's the same process, so I'm going to be running through it quickly. I draw the neckline and the armhole using my basic bodice pattern. Then I draw in the armhole, the waistline, the hip line and the hemline. Then I put in my horizontal measurements. You can refer to the back pattern for all the measurements that I'll be putting. First my bust measurement, the waist measurement, the hip measurement, and then the hem. Now we'll connect the points together. And for the neckline for the front pattern, the width is 3 inches and the depth is 3 inches as well. Now I also reduce the shoulder and I withdraw the armhole. Then I drew a line to extend the neckline, and I drew a 3/4 of an inch line from the center line outwards. Now this will be the button stand extension. Then I'm going to add a 1/2 inch seam allowance to the front, the armhole, the neckline, and on the hemline I added a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now to draw the facing for the front, I measured 2 inches on the side seam and 3 inches from the center front line, and then I connected them like so. Now that's it for the front pattern. You can trace out the facing on another piece of paper or just cut out the front piece first and then use the same pattern to cut out the facing. Now for the pocket, I'm going to measure the opening, which is the vertical part, and this is 5.5 inches. Then I'm going to draw the shape out using my free hand. Now I spread out my hand in to determine how wide it will be, and as long as I can spread my fingers, the width is okay for me. So this is 7 inches wide and 10.5 inches long, and of course, as I said earlier, the opening is 5.5 inches. Now I'm going to cut this out, but when I cut it out on my fabric, I'll be adding a 1/2 inch seam allowance around it. To make the dress, I'm going to use 2 yards of crepe fabric, and you're going to make sure that your fabric drapes well. So it's going to either be something that is lightweight or medium weight. Now this is my back piece, and I've got one piece on fold, and this is the facing. And you're going to make a notch on the waistline of the fabric. This is the front piece, and I cut out 2 pieces, and this is the front facing. Now on the wrong side of the facing, I've already put my interfacing on it, so you're going to want to do that as well. Now for the pocket, I cut out 4 pieces, and I added my seam allowance before cutting it like I said I would. On my back piece, I'm going to measure 2 inches from the waist notch, and I'm going to pin my pocket opening to the main fabric with the right sides facing each other. We're going to do this for the other side as well, and we're going to go and sew it. I'm going to be joining this using an allowance that is lesser than my side seam allowance. So my side seam allowance is 6/8 of an inch, and I'm going to be joining this using 1/4 of an inch allowance. Now after sewing it, I turn it over to the right side and I make a top stitch on the pocket. This is what it looks like after I'm done, and I'm going to go and give this a good press. Now when you're done with the back, you're going to do the same thing for the front pieces as well. Now we're going to make the loops, and I cut out a piece of fabric that is 8 inches long and 2 inches wide. And I'm going to fold this over and sew it at 3/8 of an inch allowance. After sewing, we're going to trim off most of the seam allowance. Then I use my loop turner to turn it out to the right side. Now everything was going smoothly until this loop turner decided to shame me. Anyways, I had to make a snip in the fabric to pull it out to the right side. Thankfully, it didn't pull out high up. It pulled out almost at the end, so that's fine. Now you're going to press this with the seam in the center of the fabric, like you can see that I'm doing. Then I used my tape to measure out 3 inches for the loop, and I cut out 4 pieces from this. Now on the back piece with the right side facing you, you're going to pin the wrong side of the loop, which is where this seam line is. That will be the wrong side of the loop, starting from the waist notch that we made earlier on the fabric. Now you're going to fold it over like so and pin the second side. Now from the end of the first one, I measured 1 inch and a quarter, and then I pinned the second loop. Now after we're done with one side, we're going to go and repeat the same thing on the other side. Now we're going to take this to the machine and make a stay stitch on it. Now you're going to sew this using a smaller seam allowance than your side seam, because you don't want it to show on your side seam. This is just a stay stitch. So I had to take out half an inch from the loop, because after stitching it I realized that the part that would show after I was done sewing was too wide, so I had to take it apart and then redo it. So the entire length ended up being 2.5 inches as opposed to 3 inches. Now with the right sides facing each other, I'm going to sew the front and back pieces together at the shoulder and at the side seam. And I'm going to sew it this way, joining together the pockets like so. I'll also be joining the facing at the shoulder and the side as well. Now after you're done sewing it, we're going to press the seams open. And this is it. This is what it should be looking like. And your pocket should be hidden in the seam like this. Then I trimmed the seam allowance on the shoulder seam of the main fabric and the facing just to reduce the bulk before I sew it. Now I'm going to join the facing to the main fabric at the neckline. So we're going to pin this and sew it. Now after sewing it, I'm going to turn it over to the right side and make an under stitch on the facing. When you're done sewing, you're going to give this a good press. So before sewing the armhole, I'm going to trim the facing. So I'm going to take out about a 16th of an inch from it, and I'm doing this to ensure that the facing doesn't come out on the right side of the fabric after we're done sewing it. So after we're done with that, we're going to pin the armhole with the right side facing and then sew it. After sewing it, I made snips in the seam allowance all around the armhole to loosen out the fabric, and then I trimmed the seam allowance at the side seam and at the shoulder seam to further reduce the bulk. Then I made an under stitch on the facing, and I couldn't do this in one go, so you're going to do the much that you can at once and turn the cloth to the other side and then complete it. And this is what it was looking like after I'm done. Now we're going to sew the facing to the fabric along the center front. So we're going to pin this all the way through and then sew it. After sewing it, I made an under stitch on the facing and turned it over to the right side. Now I'm going to be making the buttonholes on the right front piece, and I'm going to show you how I marked it on the pattern paper. So here I'm just folding out the seam allowance of the pattern. Then I measure ½ inch from the neckline. I made the buttons that I'll be using with my fabric, and you can use any kind of buttons that you want. And the size of my button is 3/4 of an inch. Now, so for my buttonhole, I will add 1/8 of an inch to the button size. That will make it 7/8 of an inch. So for you, you would just add 1/8 of an inch to the size of your button to determine the buttonhole. that you would use for your dress. On my center line, I will draw the buttonhole, starting it at 1/8 of an inch before the center line. Then I'll draw in the full length of the buttonhole. Now I'm going to keep drawing the buttonholes at 3 inches intervals, and I'm going to stop when I get to 6 inches above the hemline. Now this is me just showing you how I've marked it out on my fabric, and you're going to use probably a pencil or an erasable pen to do this. Now I'm going to take this to my machine to sew it. So my machine has a 4-step buttonhole, which is what I'm going to be using to do it. Now I've sewn all the buttonholes, and I'm going to use a seam ripper to make a hole in it. Then use my thread cutter to open it completely. And you want to be careful so that you don't cut any of the stitches that you've made previously. Now to sew on the button, you're going to straighten out the dress and make sure it's laying nicely and correctly. Then you're going to use a pin. We're going to pass the pin through the edge of the buttonhole to the other side of the fabric. Then you're going to use a pen or a pencil to mark it. This is where you would attach your button. And you're going to keep attaching the buttons one after the other, buttoning the dress up as you go, just to make sure that everything lines up perfectly. I also went ahead to attach a press button at the waist so that it won't gape when I tie the rope at the back. Then the next thing we're going to do is to attach the facing to the dress by the side seam, and you can do this either by making a stitch in the ditch on the right side of the main fabric like this, or you can make a stitch on the facing and the seam allowance to keep it in place like this. To hem the dress, I turn the facing over like so, and I'm going to sew this. And I'm going to continue sewing this stitch all through the rest of the fabric, as this will act as a guide for me to hem the dress. Now after sewing it, I turned the facing out to the right side, and then I pressed the rest of the hem using the stitch as a guideline. Now on my machine, I'm going to fold over the raw edge of the hem and make another stitch in it. When you're done, give this a good press. I also removed the initial stitch that I made, that's the stay stitch that I made earlier. I'm going to take that out before pressing it. And finally, you're going to make your rope for the ties, and mine was 60 inches long and 3/8 of an inch wide. And that's it, your dress is ready. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel for more videos. If you have any questions, you can leave those in the comment section, and don't forget to have fun sewing. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.